I will share few details on proxying requests to backend server in Angular. When you create an Angular application, by default it will have the port 4200 configured in it, and we will integrate our Angular application with an API server. Um, in that case, the API server will be running on some port. In our example, we'll assume the API server is running on port 3000. And if you want to integrate any APIs with Angular, uh, we will configure this URL localhost 3000 along with the API URI. So in our case, this will be the URI. We will integrate this URI, this URL with our Angular application. Let's say we are trying to view the output in browser. We will launch port 4200 in the browser, and the Angular files will get loaded. And on some actions, we will trigger this API. So in that case, the browser will initiate the API, trigger the API request to the API server. In this case, the browser will be initiating connections to port 4200 and also 3000. This is the approach without having any proxy configurations. Now with proxy configurations, you can see that the browser is always connecting to port 4200 for any Angular related requests or API requests, and the Angular dev server will decide whether to forward the particular request to API server or whether to respond to that request. So the browser is connecting to only one port here. So this will help us to avoid the course error. We have this documentation in Angular. We will be using this documentation to configure our application. I have created an Angular application. It's just a new application, and I have modified 3 files in it. I have added a HTTP client module here, and here I have added just a method which will trigger an API, and that's it. And in HTML I have added a button. I will just show that. In HTML, I have removed the boilerplate code, and I have added few texts and a button to trigger the API. And here I have added one function which will connect to an API server. Now let's see the output here. In this function, we have a host. I have an URI, and then it's triggering a GET request. That's it. Not much going on here. Now I will trigger go. There is error with origin. The API server has is blocking the request. We have two different origins. I have hosted my API server in one EC2 instance. We can fix this by enabling proxy in our Angular application. If we don't want to do that, then the other option is to enable CORS in our API server. So let's just enable proxy in our Angular application. We will create this file in src folder. And we can copy this content. In our scenario, we have the API in this format, animals/ant. So I have to, so this is like a prefix. We have to indicate what prefix our API request will have, so that the Angular dev server here Angular dev server can distinguish between the Angular specific request and the API request. If it's API request, which means that if it matches animals, then it will forward the request to API server. Otherwise, Angular dev server will serve it. Now this is fine. In my case, I have this URL, so I have to add this URL here. So once this is added, we can start the server. Now if I trigger go, we are still facing the error. In this case, we have to, since we have enabled the proxy, we can always send the request to localhost 4200, because this is the URL in which our Angular application is also getting served. I have changed that. Now still we are getting the 404. Let's go back to the documentation. We need to add the proxy configuration inside angular.json as well. So we can copy this and go back to angular.json. Here you can add the proxy configuration. I will restart the server. Now we are receiving the response. We can even remove this. This is not required. This is how we can proxy the requests. There is also a few additional configurations here. You can rewrite the URI. Let's try this. Let me add this. In this case, you can have the API as a prefix, path prefix, and you can add it here. But the Angular dev server, on identifying this, it will look at on receiving this request, it will look at this path rewrite, and it will remove this /API. So it will remove the API and it will forward /animal/and to the API server. Let's try this. This is also working fine. If you go to the network, you can see that the requests are going to API/animals/and, but this is getting modified by our Angular dev server here by using this path rewrite. There are a few additional configurations here, but for our development activities, I think this is enough. This configuration will be enough. You can also, if you are working behind a proxy, you can also look at the configurations required to bypass the proxy. Until now, we looked at how to configure the proxy to the backend server in Angular.